Well, welcome everybody. This is the fourth and final tools webinar that we have for fall 2025. This one I've been really looking forward to because NotebookLM is one that I've used for quite a while, and I'm always really impressed with the capabilities, and I think some of the functionality could work really well for your students, for you, and it's always surprising to see what else they're adding to it. And so probably by the time others who are waiting for the recording get a chance to see it, there's probably going to be something else added to it as well. A few things about NotebookLM. It was released in July 23 by Google Labs, and it's powered by Google Gemini. But it is a separate website from Google Gemini, and it is, in some senses, kind of a competitor of Google Gemini in that it has different functionality, and it is a separate platform in many respects. Now, Google describes NotebookLM as a virtual research assistant, and the name really gives away a lot of the way that this was, the function was designed. It's meant to be kind of like a research notebook where you can collect materials that you would have for research and be able to interrogate them, engage with them, use them in different ways, and they've built it out from there. Now, one of the real benefits of NotebookLM is that because you have a notebook that you build with resources, and we'll talk about what kinds of resources you can include there, this means that the answers are grounded in those materials. And that means you have far fewer hallucinations. And in fact, when I was looking at this, somebody did a study, it was probably about 6 months ago. And so it's a little bit outdated in terms of it not being the most up-to-date Google Gemini model or some of the new functionality. But even still, they found that in comparison to some other chatbots that are available, AI tools, it had a lower level of hallucinations, and it was down to about 13% of all interactions having something in it that wasn't quite exact from the original content. But what was different about it is that, and by the way, that's pretty typical for most chatbots. They're often in the 20+% range of having some hallucination. And that doesn't mean that 20%, or in this case, 13% of all answers are hallucinated. It's that in those interactions, in a series of interactions, 13% of them had something in that interaction that was probably a little off base or something incorrect in the way it was being presented. Now, what's different, though, in the type of hallucinations we find with NotebookLM is that unlike other chatbots where the hallucination might be making up a citation or making up a quote, and that's more common in something like ChatGPT and especially older versions of large language models, in NotebookLM, because it's grounded on the content you have in the notebook, it's not making up, and what they typically find with the hallucinations, it's not making up the content of the source. It's typically in terms of how it's representing that, and sometimes overstating it or understating it. So it's not as closely tied to the exact verbatim quote, but it might be overstating it or slightly misrepresenting it, probably along the lines of the way most humans might do that within their own research. So it's still one that I want to make sure that the students are very aware that there are hallucinations. It doesn't hold completely true to everything in the notebook, but it is much better in the sense that it is closely hewing to those grounded materials in the notebook. And I'll show you how that's derived in a minute. Another thing that's nice about NotebookLM is that it's very shareable in the same way, giving you the access controls you would have for Google Drive documents. For instance, if you have a Google Doc or a spreadsheet or other materials, you can share them the same way. And so it's a very familiar interface that way. It has a free version that has some limits, and we'll talk a little bit about what those limits are. It has many of the same functionalities. You just can't include as many materials in the notebook. In the case of a free version, last time I checked, you can include up to 50 documents within the notebook. And within the paid version, and I have that, it's $20 a month, and I have that as kind of my Google subscription that gives me, a lot more storage space, and that's the primary reason I've had that subscription. But with that paid version, I can include up to 300 documents in each notebook, and I get more bandwidth and more interaction that I can play around with on NotebookLM. And so I include the link there, and I'll put that in the chat when we get into playing around with it. Now, some features. As I mentioned, if you have the paid version, it's up to 300 sources. The free one has up to 50 sources, and that's quite a few sources. And I think for most student projects, it's pretty rare they would have more than 50 sources they would need for a lot of the research projects they would work on. When you incorporate materials into the notebook, you can include transcripts from YouTube just by putting the link to YouTube. Part of the benefit of being in the Google ecosystem is that they own YouTube, so they make it really easy to be able to incorporate YouTube documents. And it's really just the transcripts they pull in. You can put PDFs, so you can include other kinds of documents, Google Drive materials, web links, all of that can feed into the notebook. It has a chat interface, so you can ask questions about the materials. You can ask for an analysis or a synopsis, some kind of a summary. You can do all of those things. But then they add a number of other things that most chatbots don't include. You can include a note, which means that you can include a note that would then be part of the notebook, and it can draw from the notebook. So as you're doing the research, maybe you have some annotations or some comments that you want to incorporate into this research, put that on a note, and I'll show you how that works. You can include that as one of the documents. You can also produce audio or video overviews. Those are pretty exciting, and I'll show you some examples of those. The audio overviews even allow you to interrupt and ask the speakers questions, which is a really great engaging way to go back and forth over some of the materials. Then there are some things that aren't as often reported, but I find incredibly useful. Mind maps, to be able to look at the material to figure out how these materials are working with topics, subtopics, and generating from there, and some great ways to engage with it. You can also generate quizzes, flashcards, and reports. So when we think about use cases, let me just say a couple of them, and then let's dig in, and I'll show you some examples of some notebooks, and we can see how some of these different functions work. If I'm thinking about this from the perspective of an instructor, I think I could do a lot with this, and I have done some examples of this with course preparation and a little bit of delivery. So if I take all of the materials that I have for my course, and let's say I put all the readings into a notebook and maybe some of the support materials, then I can engage with those materials and help me maybe craft some of the material for the syllabus, or to even think about a draft schedule that I might have for some of those assignments if I have copies of those assignments there. I can also create things like the audio or video overviews, or share the flashcards or the quizzes for students. So this isn't going to take the place of Canvas by any means, and it doesn't do any grading. So it's not going to offer that level of delivery or course management, but you can share some of the materials that students can use, and it gives them another way to access the material for the course. You can also think about it in terms of interactive teaching tools, kind of like those things that I just mentioned, sharing audio overviews, the note cards, quizzes, and so forth, and to be able to share the full notebook as well as just individual parts of the notebook so that students can engage with it, and you have control over what they have access to, which is really nice. Doing a literature review, I think, would be fantastic with this. Not that I would want to offload it for it to produce the lit review, but if I'm working on the lit review and I have some questions about maybe am I missing anything from a source, to have all of it in a notebook, and then I can ask questions about what other articles talk about this idea, it will show me the articles, and I can even link to it and see where in the articles it's found. And so for working on a lit review, that's great. I think for collaborative research projects, I have a little bit of experience in this, working with some high school debaters and hearing about it used by college debaters. If they have a lot of their research materials in a notebook, they can share it equally, that they all have access to the contents of the materials. They can each add to the content of the material if it's shared with those protocols. And then they can work together on sharing all of the materials, which makes it a really good collaborative tool. And I like that because instead of its students just thinking about receiving content from an AI tool, they're really active in developing it, and they have a lot of agency in that process. Then there's also a case to be made for some accessibility enhancements. And this isn't going to address a lot of the accessibility concerns that we have and that we're working on this year. But if you do want to produce something in another language, this is one way that you can do that for some of the materials, making it an audio overview or visual, to be able to prepare it in different content in different ways. You can make it a little bit more accessible to some students. And I think that might give them a better access point that they might have had otherwise. Now, let's jump into a notebook, and I'll show you what it looks like. If you just go to notebooklm.google.com, and I'll put this in the chat so you have it, and you can try it out. I believe if it is free, but I think you have to have a Google account, and you can get that for free, and you can even just create one just for this purpose if you'd like. When you first log in, you can go to My Notebooks or any that are shared with you, but I want to start by showing you some of the featured notebooks. And they've started this over the last 6 or 8 months or so, including these public notebooks that are created by different organizations. So I remember one of the first ones I saw was The Economist had one, The World Ahead 2025, and they have 70 documents here. And if I click on it, I have access to everything that's listed here. Now, the notebook is always broken down this way. You have on the left sources, and these are the documents that are included. And if I click on one, it'll actually open it up so that it gives me a guide at the top. But then if I scroll down, I can see the full text of that document. So if they've imported a document, I can read the full document there, and I can see the full text of the document. I can always go back and close that and open another one, and I can see exactly what's on that document as well. So in this case, The Economist has made this copy available for anybody in this public notebook to have access to. I think for this public notebook, they only have documents, but we'll look at some other examples where you can include things like YouTube links or web links and so forth. The middle always has the chat, and this is a chance for you to be able to ask questions about anything related to the material. So I could just put a question about, well, they have some prepared ones here. How will geopolitical tensions shape global economic, technological, and migration patterns? So I'll ask that question and we'll see that it's starting to generate. And hopefully it'll give us a good example of where it will then link to the different documents. I think if you have a free account, it's going to be a little slower in terms of giving the results. And if you have a paid account, it'll probably be a little bit faster. That ties into the bandwidth. Now you'll notice it gives you this answer, but it has footnotes. And for each one, now if I hover over the footnote, I can see the text from the document that it pulled it from. And if I click on it, it'll open that document and it'll show me the highlighted section that it drew it from. So in terms of referencing direct quotes and direct material from the documents you have, this is very good at hewing very close to those grounded documents. And you can see it even has some others that I have. So if I want to click on the second one, it shows me here's the quote that it's using to be able to support this paragraph. And if I jump down here, the world GPT growth to just 2.5%, click on this, and I can see it down here. So it shows world GDP will grow by just 2.5%. So this is a great way to be able to interact with a bunch of documents, to be able to see where it's found in that material. I think there's still concerns about perhaps somebody using this to generate a report instead of writing it themselves. We want to certainly give students better guidance about how to use this effectively and responsibly, but this is a good way to be able to interact with those documents, to be able to find out questions you might have. And if I want to dig in a little deeper, I might say, tell me more about trade wars and tariffs. And we'll see how it responds. It'll dig down a little bit further. So this chat interface is just like you would see in ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini Pro. And in this case, so I think, Marco, I think you put a request to share. If you want to share, is it something you wanted to share on your screen?
I'm sorry. Are you sharing something on your screen? I'm only seeing your faces.
Oh, okay. Can you all see my shared screen? Yeah, okay. I think others are able to. So maybe look at the top tab in Zoom. You might be able to see a different option for just the participants
Oh,
or
got it,
for
got it,
the
got it.
rest of the meeting.
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Good, good. I'm glad we got that figured out. So in this case, it's just like dealing with another chatbot where I can interact and get back and forth answers. But this is obviously going to be tied to the documents I have in the notebook, and it's really limited to what's in the notebook. So it's far fewer hallucinations. I can verify them more easily by actually opening up the document. And so this is a really great way to reinforce to students that we want to make sure that we're tying it closely to the research, verifying those quotes, and that we're able to do a little more responsible research with some of these tools as we put this all together. Now, over to the right, then you'll see Studio. And this is where you have a lot of other materials that are generated. And they made these all available. I'm going to show you within another example because I want to show you how you can create one. These are all made publicly available, but I can't change them because they've had settings set up in such a way that I can access them, I can view them, but hopefully they wouldn't want me to delete them though, or change it. I clicked on the mind map, and this is a good one that I can show you here. What's great about this is it starts with the overall topic, and it shows me subcategories. If I say culture and society now, I can look at this, and in the chat, it'll start showing me some content about culture and society. And so it'll then tie it back to those documents. But then again, in the mind map, I can go down and drill down a little further. Let's say I want to go into sports and ethics. And now I have enhanced games, doping in sports. And if I click on this mind map, it'll then jump into specific areas. And you'll see if I scroll down, I'll see in the chat where it's going into it. So here, discuss what the sources say about enhanced games, doping in sports. And it gives me content about this. And again, I can click on the link. I can see the articles. I can see where the content is in those articles. What I really love about the mind map, and I'll make this a little bigger so we can see it, is that this is a great way for students, if they have access to a lot of materials, to be able to see how the different content will work together, and how there will be subcategories, how to drill down into different subcategories, maybe to be able to dig a little deeper. I find I have the experience with students, if I give them a topic about something or they're thinking about a topic for a speech, let's say, they typically pick the top level. I want to talk about climate change. Okay, well, there's a lot to say about climate change. How about if you dig down into that a little bit, and maybe even just starting with this and having having them put together a lot of materials in a notebook LM to then explore some subcategories and some subtopics that are related, it gives them a chance to be able to say, hey, here's an aspect of this that I could speak about in my speech or in my paper or presentation that I wasn't really aware of, and I wasn't sure how I could develop this. This isn't going to be enough, but this is a good way to help brainstorm as they start basing it on the research, and not just brainstorming about things they don't really know about. This way they can brainstorm based on materials that are found in that research. And it's a good way for them to see how to organize it that way. So I think this is a really great way for them to kind of get a better sense of how this all plays out. They always have these little carrots in the right to be able to close or open any of these materials. So that's the mind map feature. Then you have a document, and this is how to use the notebook. And so that's useful. You can create a lot of those. They have this playing feature, and this is one that is a video overview. And we can see an example of what the video overview looks like. So if I play,
welcome to the Explainer.
Can you all hear that?
Our way through 2025. It's turning out to be a year just full of contradictions. So today we're going to dive into some of the most surprising insights for the year. All what a year it is.
Can always skip ahead.
Incredible hype is going to start with maybe the biggest contradiction of all.
The video overviews produce slides, basically. They're just static visuals that they have with an audio overview. And depending upon how you set up that audio overview or the video overview, it'll give you just a general overview, or you can have it drill down in some specific ways. And we'll look at some examples of that. But this is not a bad content. I can make it full screen. I don't know if you can see that. I put it full screen on my computer, or you can just watch it within the notebook. And of course, you can see the prompt that they used to be able to create this, and that's something your students would be able to see as well. And this allows you to download it. So I could actually download this video overview if I wanted to have it on my own computer, or if I wanted you have it access to it when it's offline. So students would have access to that too. And again, if you go to settings, you can decide how you'd like to be able to share this, how you'd like somebody to have access to it. Now, this is all a public notebook. It's view only. I can't change anything. So I'm going to go back, click on the NotebookLM emblem, and I'm going to go to My Notebooks, and I'll show you some examples of a notebook, and then we'll create one, and you'll be able to see how this comes together. So this is one that I created with just, what do I have, about 9 or 10 documents here on AI in higher education. Obviously, I'm spending a lot of time working on this topic, and I wanted to see how this would come together. So again, you have the documents over here. In this case, I have some of them as materials that were online that I have, and you have the full document, you can see. I have some PDFs. So you can see the full PDF, and this is from Computers in Education, Artificial Intelligence that I had access to. So you can see I have the full document. And in this case, I don't have any YouTube videos or web pages, but you can always add them. In the chat, I can ask any question that I'd like. It gives me an overview automatically. But let me show you some examples of these other materials in the studio and how these might work. If I work on the video overview first, I can just click on video overview. It'll create one. And it used to only do that. But now they have an edit function. And when I do this, and hopefully you can see the pop-up that's showing up here where it says customize video overview. Okay, good. So I can drill down into this a couple of different ways. So I can have an explainer video, or I could have a brief video. I can choose language. And they have some 80 languages that are included here, which is really fantastic. And it's, it's going to be limited in the way that any AI tool is with those languages, but it's still pretty good in terms of being able to produce it in that language. So I could really produce in any language almost any language that I could think of. And I could use that for students. So for a language class, that'd be fantastic. Then they've added visual style. And so I can change it. It'll auto select. I could go with the classic version, or I could do with anime or watercolor. Any of these, papercraft, lots of different things I can do. But what's even better, the most important part of this, I think, is here where I can decide what I want it to focus on. So if I have these materials and I have it for students, I might say something about focus on a discussion of university policy related to AI in the classroom. Now that's going to give it the instructions that when it's generating the content, it's going to focus specifically on that. And it's going to take a little while. It'll take a few minutes for it to generate. While that's generating, let me show you some of the other materials that we have here. So here's flashcards, for instance. It'll just generate basic flashcards. In this case, here, why did OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, shut down its own AI detection software? See the answer? It was shut down because of poor accuracy and high error rates. Now, students can create these flashcards, great way to study. If they're wondering about the answer, click on Explain, and it pulls it up in the chat. and it gives them the explanation. And in that explanation, just like any other chat, it'll link it to the document so it'll show them where they can get that answer. So here, shut down because its own AI detection software because of poor accuracy. I'll click on the article and I find where it is. So for students using this, I mean, I wish I'd had this when I was a student. If I could put all of the class readings, and I want students to do the reading on their own first, but then to be able to review, to be able to put them all here and do a flashcard or a sample quiz to be able to get ready for a class quiz or a test. I think this is a great way for them to be able to manage all of that material very easily, and not to take the place of reading it themselves, but to be able to better prepare. So flashcards works really well. I was impressed with it. I liked how it worked. Let me show you also then a quiz. I think I have an AI quiz here. And it just generated, based on the 9 sources, 12 questions. And you can look for a hint. You can guess. Not quite. It gives me the right answer. It spells it out. If I want to explain, it again pulls it up in the chat and it'll go to the document. Again, it's always grounded on the documents. So it's going to base the quiz, the content for the reports, for the overviews, all based on the documents you have in the notebook. So it's very closely hewing to that, which makes it, I think, a lot more useful and definitely more responsible. That's the right model. I want students to see that they put the materials together to figure out how they're going to be engaging with those materials. All right, so quizzes, flashcards, those are excellent. Let me show you an example of a video here that I did, and I had to use a different visual style. I think this is the one I did with a different visual style.
Which, of course, brings us to the real question.
Actually, that's not the one. There was a different one. See which one I just opened. Yeah, that's the same one. So beyond detection, this is the one I wanted. This one I wanted it to use.
Trap. What do we do instead?
Yeah, so it has a different visual style. It uses kind of paper cut animation. Just a different way to make it visually engaging. And you can see it works pretty well. So in this case, I can click on share. And with this, you can look at the sharing features just like sharing in Google Doc. I can decide if I want to give people access to it to be able to have unrestricted access. They can only access it to open it. Anyone with a link can open it. I can give them access to the full notebook or the chat only. I have a lot of control over the different materials that I might want to share and what I want them to be able to do with it. So I could share this with students pretty easily without giving them the ability to change the content in the notebook. But that way they'd be able to look at the video overviews, the audio overviews, and look at the content of those materials. So it's still generating the video overview that I was trying before. But I wanted to show you the audio overview function. And there are 2 different ways I can access this. I had this created earlier so we could look at it. If I just click on this.
The massive and often pretty messy integration of generative AI. We want to zoom in on what this actually means for things like academic integrity, how we assess student learning.
You can always change the playback speed.
Need for AI literacy across the board.
Yeah, and for instructors, for administrators, this isn't just a minor inconvenience, you know? It feels like an existential moment for many.
So.
This is a pretty good overview function. They've had this for close to a year. I remember generating a couple of these at the beginning of the spring semester for people. And it's a pretty convincing kind of podcast format of an overview about the materials. Now, just like with the video overview, with the audio overview, you have a lot of control. You can have it do a deep dive, a brief discussion, a critique, a debate. You can make it short. You can make it long, 80 different languages again. And you can tell it what to focus on in the episode. So you get a lot of control over what you'd like it to do. I love that it has the debate function because you can have them debate something out and give it instructions debate about what are the best policies to use in the university for AI policy, given that this is about AI in higher education. Or maybe it's about materials you have in your class and you want them to debate about applications or which would be the better approach that they might have. You can give those specifications in this dialog box below so that they'll know a bit more about how they want to focus on that in the episode. So a lot of control that they really didn't have before, which was really great. Now, I showed you this audio overview, and it's just the regular audio overview. You can download it, you can share it, change playback speed. But they added this function of making it interactive. And so let's try that one out. You'll look at it, it'll look a little different. So you can't jump around in the podcast because it's not just a linear audio file, but you will be able to listen to it and I'll be able to join in and ask a question. So I'll start this.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're pulling the thread on, well, the single biggest shockwave currently ripping through universities and colleges everywhere.
You mean generative AI?
Exactly. The massive and often pretty messy integration of generative AI. We want to zoom in on what this actually means for things like
Oh, hey there, what's up?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm wondering what's a better way to handle assessment in a college classroom if I'm worried about students using generative AI to write papers?
That is the absolute perfect question to ask right now.
It really is. The short answer is that the old ways of assessing, like the classic take-home paper, are basically obsolete.
Exactly. Trying to detect AI use is a losing battle.
Yeah, those detectors are just too unreliable.
So the shift has to be towards redesigning the assignment itself.
Right. We need to structure assignments so that outsourcing the thinking to AI becomes irrelevant or impossible.
So you can see it's pretty responsive, and it didn't even take that long. They've gotten better at making it very quick in terms of giving the answers. I demoed this for a group of high school debaters over the summer, and it blew them away because it was giving them an overview about a debate topic they were preparing for. I hit the join button. I asked a question about, hey, what value framework should I use in the Lincoln Douglas debate? And it knew exactly how to answer. It says, oh, for a Lincoln Douglas debate, you might think about deontology, or you could use utilitarianism. And then it started citing different materials in the source content as to how they could go about doing that. And what I like about this is then it's not students just receiving it. It reminds them that they have an active role to play in this. And they aren't just going to listen thinking, well, if they aren't really answering something that I'm interested in, or I'm not really sure I understand that, they can always ask the follow-up and they can join in. This is still fairly new. They've only had this available since the summer. I think they'll probably add that in and be able to expand it a little bit further. But even in its current version, I think there's a lot of potential here for students, if you want to be able to share this with some content that you have, for them to be able to interact, to be able to ask more questions, follow-up questions. And again, it's tied to the source materials. So it will answer questions that they might ask based on the source materials. So if you have content from your class and you want to make sure it's answering questions based on that, that's a lot better than the voice mode in ChatGPT, which might pull in something else from the web or from its training data. That's probably good. But this is going to be very close to what you want the students to have access to and what you want the answers to be coming from. Let me pause there and see if there are any questions about some of these materials, and then I'll create a new notebook and we'll show you kind of how you add content and what we can do with it. Are there any questions at this point? All right, then let's create and I'll show you the share features. You could see them down below where we had access to individual items I wanted to share. Here I can add in groups, and you might be able to make it available for students in your class, or you could just give it a link and you say with the link, you can decide whether or not they have access to the full notebook or the chat only, let's say chat only. And I can preview it to see exactly what that looks like. So they'll have access to this. They won't have access to the other materials, the overviews. They'll only have access to the chat. But think about the possibilities for this. If you have certain materials that you wanted students to have access to or have read or as follow-up questions, you could set them up in a notebook, share this chat, and then when they have questions about it, they could go and ask it, and it's going to closely align it with whatever sources you have in that notebook already. But it's a good way for students to get additional follow-up questions, and they would have easy access to this. All right, so let me go back to this, and I'm going to close that, and I'm going to create a new notebook. So if I click back on the NotebookLM emblem, the logo in the left, I'll go to create a new notebook. Now, when I start here, it immediately gives me this pop-up that asks about adding sources. A lot of different ways you can add sources. You could just drag and drop files into this middle box for uploading sources, or I could click on choose file and give me a file manager, and I can select different features or different things I'd like to include. I could go to my Google Drive. If you have your Google Drive attached to this, linked to this account that you're using, you can have it search your Google Drive and have it pull certain documents that you like to have. But let me show you a couple of other things. I can add a copied text. So if I have material that I have, let's say maybe from a transcript of a class or from a meeting or notes that I've taken, I can copy it in, and then that just becomes part of the materials within the notebook. So that's something you can do. Let me go back to this box. Now here I want to be able to pull in links. So let's say I want to go with the website. I want to pull in the Center for AI's website. So I'm going to highlight the website. And I just paste the URL. And now that's going to pull it in. And typically what it's doing is it's going to pull content from that website and just have like the text of the website that's available here. So you can pull websites in. There's always a concern with the websites that, it might change over time. And so it might not have the most current version of it. But for, just doing something initially, that's not a bad idea. I'm going to go back to add, and I'm going to say I want to pull in from YouTube videos. Now, if I go to the YouTube account we have for the center, I'm going to go to this one. It's the public debate we had on AI and the environment, and I'm just going to click on share. That gives me this box to click the link, copy the link, And if I go back to the notebook, I can just put the URL for the YouTube video on here. Now, it's important to note this is not multimodal. It's not actually watching the video. It's not listening to the video. It's taking the transcript that YouTube automatically creates. So if you have a video on YouTube that does not have a transcript, it's not going to be able to pull anything in. And it's pretty rare anymore that a YouTube video will not have a transcript. Once in a while, I found some that it's just not possible for them to have a transcript or they don't for some reason. That's not going to work. But 99% of the videos will work that way. But it is important to remember that if it's a video that has visuals that are important that aren't referenced in the transcript, that's going to be lost. This will only include the transcript of that video. So now that's included as well. So if I have this, and let's say I'm going to also add, let's say I'm going to discover sources. Here's another way I can go about doing it. It used to be you could only include documents that you had, and then they started adding YouTube videos, websites. Now it allows you to do a web search. So in this case, I'm interested in AI and the liberal arts. So I'm just going to say AI and the liberal arts. And when I click submit, it's going to pull up to 10 sources at a time. At least that's been the limit that it's used recently. And when it gives me the links, I can decide which of these I'd like to include. Some of them are PDFs, some of them are documents. I'm just going to select all sources, and I'm going to import them. So I can add those into my notebook. I can also add, and I'm going to go to Discover Sources, but this time I'm going to look at my Google Drive. I'm going to say AI, the liberal arts. And when I search this, it's only looking at documents in my Google Drive. So this is also a great way to take a lot of materials that you might have access to in the Google Drive and incorporate it. So here, the proposal to establish a Center for AI and the Liberal Arts. That was the document that I have. I have a couple of different versions of it, a blog post, a perplexity report, intro to AI story pitch, a PowerPoint slide that I created for AI and art history. I'm going to import those too. Now remember, it's only doing 10 at a time. So if you have more than that, you might want to do this add again or discover sources and be able to pull those in too. So now I have a variety of different sources, web links, I have PDFs, I have video transcripts, lots of different content here. And again, through the chat, I can start asking a question. So here's a standard question that's already prepared for me. I'll ask that question. I can go through and create a mind map. That'll take it a little bit of time. But in this case, now I've created that notebook with those materials, and I can create any materials that I want in the studio that'll be supportive of it. So here, distinct interdisciplinary advantages, just like in the others, it'll pull it from the specific document, and this pulls it from the proposal. Development of hybrid skill sets, I can click on it. It's going to pull it from the this time the website. So it's really good, does a good job. But this is one where I just added the content, and it was able to give me that kind of feedback pretty instantly to be able to analyze what I had there. So I'm going to let that create for a little bit, and I'm going to go back over to this one, and we can see a little bit more about what we could do. There's one more function that I didn't talk about yet, and that was reports. And so within a report, you could do a lot with this. You could do a briefing doc, you could do a study guide, you could do a blog post, create your own. For any of these, if I say, different formats as well, you can have it formatted in lots of different ways. Now, I think this raises some concerns, a little bit of a question as to whether or not somebody could take all of the content, put it in a notebook, and then have it create a report. And there is the chance of that. And that's something we certainly want to guide students away from. But if you want to be able to use this to be able to create a study guide or to be able to create an overview document, you can do that. And you can have it dig in on something that you really wanted to spell out. In this case, let's try a study guide. And here it's going to be a quiz with answer key plus glossary, and I can change the language, and then I can say what I want the report to create. And I'm going to say, it concludes this, the instructions, create a quiz, suggest 5 essay format questions. In this case, you could actually use this to generate a quiz based on materials that you're using for the class. So if you're thinking about this for course material, that could be useful. And I'm going to say focus on AI detection tools for all of the questions. Like with the others, it'll take a little while for it to generate, but it'll start generating it based on these documents, and then you'll have that to be able to draw from as well. So when we think about some of the use cases, I think what's really shows a lot of potential is for students to be able to put materials in to use for flashcards and quizzes, to be able to prepare for content that they're responsible for. I think for collaborative work, for them to have a shared notebook, if they're working on a group project, to be able to have all of the content there that they can then access through a mind map, audio or video overview, as well as learning the content, but also even generating some content that they would use for a presentation. I think that would be really useful too. And then for your own use as a faculty member, to be able to create a lot of content to use in class for explainer videos or audio overviews, and the ability for the audio overview to have an interaction so that you can interact with it and ask it questions, I think is something that would be really great to include in classes. So the study guide, it's already ready. And so you can open this up and we'll be able to look at it. It has short answer questions. It has an answer key for each one. Now, in this case, it doesn't include the links to the source documents. And I wonder if maybe if I change that, if it would allow me to do that. And maybe it would give me those links so that I could verify any of these items. But in this case, it's drawn all of this content. I recognize this content from the source documents that I had. So it's a pretty complete study guide. And it might even be something that you're able to use to be able to generate a quiz or other content. Now, my advice for any faculty member using content like this, if you're going to be using it with students, be transparent about using it. Let them know, hey, I created this on NotebookLM. Show them how you created it. I think it's great for them to learn how to use these tools as well. And even if you create a quiz with it, let them know you created a quiz with it. And I think I'd let them know, hey, I've checked this. If you find a mistake, let me know. I want to verify it. But I created this using NotebookLM. This is how you can do it to be able to quiz yourself and to be able to prepare yourself for your own quiz or materials in class.